Welcome to the Ascent Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Burgess. This is part 2 of a 2-part tribute celebrating the life of Denny Burgess, my father, who passed in early 2020. The first person we talked to is Belinda Isaacson. Belinda was one of the first hires by my dad at his business, Our Home South, over 25 years ago. Following my dad's passing, she's become the Executive Director of the organization. She talks about the early days at Our Home South, Denny's commitment to his clients and his employees, and the difficulty he had judging Christmas decorating contests. Belinda, thanks for joining us today.
Joe, thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about Our Home South and what your role has been at Our Home South?
Our Home South was founded in 1994. Denny opened his first home here in Medford, and then every 6 months after that, probably the first home was opened, the second home, was opened in September of 1994. And then for a while there, for a few years, we were opening probably 2 locations a year. And then we fast forward to today, and we have 23 locations. And we are in Faribault, Morristown, Medford, and Otana, so the 4 surrounding cities.
What is your official title?
Oh, I've had many titles. Right when your dad passed away, he gave me the title of the COO, Chief Operations Officer. After your dad passed away, in some of his paperwork, he now appointed me the Executive Director of Our Home South.
Fantastic. Thanks. So obviously, I know what the business is about, but for the people who will be listening, describe what Our Home South does.
Yes, we provide homes for people with disabilities, and we staff each location 24 hours a day, and our staff are responsible for taking our people on outings, giving positive support to our people, helping them deal with, any situations they have in their life, preparing meals, giving them medications, and just everyday daily living, trying to make it. And Denny's motto was, Our Home South is a nice place to live. That's Our Home South's motto. Yeah, so I know in growing up with Denny, that prior to starting Our Home South, he worked for a state campus in Faribault that housed developmentally disabled. So his homes then, I know he went from like an institutional setting, and he really wanted to have individual homes, and I know there's only 3 or 4 individuals in homes, and there's less. Some of them are in apartments, but he wanted them to feel like his own home, right? Absolutely, Joe. And yes, you are right. Your dad was at the regional center, and way back when, it was actually called, and we're talking, 40, 50 years ago, the School for the Feeble-Minded. Obviously, it's come a long way. Laws have really changed. But yes, your dad wanted to make individual small settings, individual homes tailored to their needs. And yes, it's not Our Home South homes. It's the individual's homes where they can kind of decorate how they want their rooms and have a say on what goes on in their life. Before at the regional center, when Denny was there for 25 years, there was like hundreds of them of developmentally disabled people in one building. They all had to 20 of them in a room. Nothing was individualized. You maybe had 1 or 2, maybe 3 staff watching, 50 individual people, which was not at all tailored to their needs. So that's when the regional center decided to shut down and get people into smaller, less restrictive group homes. And that was your dad's vision. In fact, one of my first jobs when I was 15 years old was working at the regional center. And, was it really? Okay.
Yeah. So I know firsthand, it was what the institutions were at the time, which was the early 90s, right? It was, what's the way to say it? There was probably 2 or 3 of us in a wing that housed 20 clients, I would call them, or disabled adults. Yeah. And the furniture was, I don't know, old hospital-y. Absolutely. And, Denny, that was one of the things he did, too. He wanted the homes, Our Home South homes, to look like mine or yours. When you walk into any one of our 23 locations, you would never know it's a group home. He always bought top of the line furniture, paintings, lamps. And, I'm trying to do
let's go back to me. So your dad first hired me in 1994. I was the second employee hired as just a part-time employee.
And were you at the regional center at all, or no?
I never worked at the regional center. Nope. I met your dad. Your dad put an ad in the newspaper, in the Fairbolt Daily News, that he was doing open interviews because he was opening group homes. Mm-hmm. And I had worked for a different provider before Denny. So I met your dad for my interview out at Happy Chef in Fairbolt, which is no longer there, and had my interview out there, and he hired me as a part-time employee. Well, over the years, I slowly worked my way up. I've done every position in the company, and probably the last almost last 20 years, I have been at the office with Denny. Mm-hmm. And, I worked with your dad every day. Your dad was wonderful, not only to me, but to all the employees. And first and foremost, the individuals we served. He just had a huge heart, and his motto was they deserve to live just like you and I do. It's their right to.
So give me your impression of how he was with the clients. And you think of him as a CEO of a business that I know in some CEOs in that industry, they never even know who the clients are. They never spend any, real time with the clients. What was my dad's way of handling or working with the clients?
Oh, Joe, you just nailed it on the head right there. Because yes, your dad was very involved, and they would look to him like their dad. And anytime they had a problem, your dad was right there. For one and foremost, he would listen. And no matter what the problem was, he would listen. And he would always validate what their issue was. If he didn't think it was a concern, I think it's a concern. So he would validate what they were saying. And he's like, okay, I understand why you're upset. I understand you're mad because of this. Now let's sit down and see what we can do to work this out. And your dad was always one that would say, oh, I want this, this, and this. Well, all that's probably not in your budget, but let's get this. And your dad just had a way of making all of our individuals just feel like they're being heard. And I think that was first and foremost. And, he had a way too. It's like they would, obviously call us names. They don't think like you or I. They can't control their anger like you or I. Mm-hmm. So they would call him names and swear at him. And he's like, I don't appreciate that. However, I can understand why you're upset. And he just had a way with his words, not only with our individuals, but our employees too. But you're right. When we first opened, we had a lot of difficult people. And sure, we had our rough days, but a lot of times your dad was coming in the evenings, helping us calm things down. And when he got there, he was, for the most part, able to calm things down just by the way he talked and listened. And you could, I think our individuals truly knew that he cared, knew that he cared. And by him, his sudden death had a huge impact on our individuals. It really did. And to this day, they're still talking about Denny, which I welcome that. I encourage that. And here at his office here in Medford, what all our staff did is I collected money, and we put a bench up across the street. So we have this nice bench that's has a plaque that we all engraved and put on there. And it's like Denny can sit across in the park and look on to what he built. I mean, it just makes me feel good that we were all able to pull together and get this for Denny.
Well, and so now, how many clients today does Our Home South serve?
Right now, we're down a couple because of COVID. So right now, we are at 53 individuals.
And how many staff people support those 53 individuals?
Right now, we are at 148 staff.
148 staff.
But we right now have 4 locations that have 4 clients in there. The rest are 2-person apartments, and we actually have right now 2 1-person apartments. And again, they all get 24-hour staffing.
24-hour care. Got it. I was thinking back to, because I know this was always a big deal for my dad when we were talking about holidays with the clients. What would he do special for the holidays?
Oh, my goodness. So every year, not only would your dad give each of our clients, he would give the staff for each of our clients $30 for the staff to go out and buy every one of our clients Christmas gifts, whether they had family or not, which most of our clients don't. Denny wanted everybody to have a Christmas gift to open on Christmas. So that was one of the things, that's one of the only providers that I've ever heard of doing that. He also does the same thing for the clients' birthdays. But then for the last 21 years, we had what you call the OHS Christmas judging. So all of our locations, they would come up with a theme, a Christmas theme, and they would decorate. And we'd have judges, which myself, Denny, and our spouses would go and either get a car, and we would drive around to all these locations and judge them. And we would have judging papers, and at our Christmas party, we would then tally up and see who the winner was. And then to the winners, he would give out gift cards to Walmart, and then we'd have an overall winner where they would get like a pizza party. Well, your dad, because he's like, oh my gosh, this place did this, but this place did this. We'd usually end up with everybody being a winner. And they would, everybody would be a winner. Everybody would get gift cards. And then I made certificates. And for each location, like there was 5 categories that they would participate in, that we would judge on. And we had certificates for each category. But yeah, your dad, oh, but wait, we have to give a gift to everybody because they look at all they did, and I don't want anybody to feel left off. So that's what he would do. But he so enjoyed the Christmas decorating contest. It was his favorite.
Well, and speaking of staff, you've mentioned you worked at a different place before, and some years ago, but you had. How did I don't know if you have a general feel, only not only from your own experience, but maybe other staff people that work for Our Home South, what they felt like or what they feel like when they think of Our Home South next to any other places that they've worked in that industry.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because I do all the interviewing too, and I'll ask them, what does this provider do? What does that provider do? And then I give my spiel on Our Home South and our history and what Denny used to do for not only employees, but our individuals. And they're like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of a provider giving money to buy them Christmas gifts, giving money to buy them birthday gifts. Every year, we would also have a client/family picnic where we would rent a park. And 2 years ago, we had it where there was over probably 175 people, the clients plus their family, and Denny catered in food from Hy-Vee. We decorated. I think your dad ended up spending $5,000 on it, and no other provider has done that or does do that. And Denny didn't get reimbursed for any of that. He was just doing it out of the goodness of his heart. And when I go on and on, some of these people I'm interviewing who have worked at other providers, their mouth just keeps dropping and dropping. I can't believe that. Or somebody would pick up, let's say, 20 hours of overtime, right? Because somebody always has to be there. Mm-hmm. Denny would give them a handwritten thank you card and a check and say, thank you so much for picking up these shifts at the last minute. They just couldn't believe all the stuff that Denny not only did for the clients, but for employees.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. He was amazing. He was amazing.
So is there any particular story related to a client, or maybe it's even with staff or anybody else that sticks out to you, any individual story with a difficult person or difficult situation or funny situation? I know, he tried to make light of things most of the time.
He certainly did. Well, I do have a story, actually. When we got our 4-person home in Medford, when we first started, we had this one client who's still with us to this day. She was very difficult, very difficult. Well, your dad decided she should probably be in her own apartment. Everything upsets her. Okay, fine. So we put her in her own apartment. Well, you can't say the word no to her. Well, one time somebody said the word no to her. It was your dad, me, and one of our LPNs were running down Bridge Street in Otana, which I don't know if you know Bridge Street, very, very busy, okay? Yeah. Cars going everywhere. This individual was running down Bridge Street. Us 3 are chasing her. Cars are stopping. Do you guys need help? And then your dad finally caught her, and they're like, hey, what are you doing to her? We're like, we're okay. We work with her. Oh, my God. And the police showed up. It was something else. And we talked about that story for many, many years. Your dad was able to convince her, okay, get up off the middle of Bridge Street, because by then she was crying in the middle of Bridge Street. Let's get up. Let's jump in my car. He was able to convince her to get in his car and go back to the apartment and work it out. We talked about that for years. And, your dad, he would always tease me because your dad has taught me so much, and I was so grateful for Denny. And I would always say, teach me. And he took me, under his wing, and he taught me everything he ever knew. And the last few years, I always thank him. Thank you so much, Denny. I've learned so much from you. And he'd say to me, Belinda, when you talk, it's like I'm talking. You have, I'm so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. I go, well, I've learned from the best, Denny. And he'd chuckle and give me a little hug and say, thanks for you. He was just awesome. I'm awesome. I miss your dad very much.
What do you think you'll miss the most? Your dad and I worked together for 20 years, right? 40 hours a week, every day, him and I. And we would not only talk about work, but obviously we got to be very close. And we would talk about everything. I would bounce off stuff off of him. He would bounce off stuff off of me. What I think I miss the most is just we would give each other crap. I don't know if I can swear, but I won't. We would give each other crap, and he would take it so well and I would take it so well. And it's like we could totally, he would be saying something and I kind of like finish it. Oh, is this what you mean, Denny? You're going to kind of choke me up a little bit. Right.
I know your dad and I were just very close. Not only was he my boss, but I considered him one of my best friends. My best friends, and I will miss my best friend, and I miss my best friend very much.
Right,
very much.
Well, that's awesome.
Absolutely, it's just not. I mean, I want to make Denny proud and carry on as he would, and I feel like I'm doing that. But no, I miss him very much.
Wow, that's fantastic, Belinda. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, I want to thank you for taking the time to reminisce a little bit and to help others get to know Our Home South and what his passion was for the last 25 or 30 years of his life. And obviously for people to know you and your influence on that. Obviously you were his right-hand person the whole time. And I appreciate everything that you did for him and still do for Our Home South. And I really thank you for taking the time to share how he was with his business.
Oh, thank you, Joel, for allowing me this opportunity. I thank you.
Next up, we pivot to my sisters, Teresa Miller-Glover and Erin O'Donnell. We all had a great time talking about growing up, including living in a haunted house, my dad's sense of humor, his generosity, artistic ability, and his secret ingredient to his world-famous potato salad. So, I think the first question that I'm just thinking of on top of mind, what is your first memory with Dad? Teresa, why don't you start?
Well, my very earliest memory was Christmas, and I was probably maybe 5 or 6. I was little. We were at the Brown House by the senior high, and all I wanted in the world was roller skates, and I begged, and I begged, and I begged, and Dad kept saying, no, 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 no. And I woke up one morning, and it wasn't Christmas, it wasn't my birthday, it wasn't anything, and he had them sitting on the kitchen table, and they were white with orange wheels. And that was my very first memory. He finally gave them to me.
Well, that's great.
Wow.
I'm sure I don't even have a story like that. At least I can't think of one.
We always got exactly what we wanted all the time.
Well, yeah.
Like, at least once a year,
yeah. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, for sure.
Erin, what's your first memory?
Yeah, so I think, and it was kind of almost laughing to myself as, Teresa, you were telling yours, but it actually was in the Brown House, specifically when we were downstairs, all of us, and in that big queen-size bed because Dad was scared because of the ghosts stomping on the floor, on the hallway going down. Ghosts which have never actually truly existed, if you ever ask them after that. But
if you ask them today, or yes.
Yeah.
Well, we can continue your thought, but a little bit of background on the haunted house that we lived in.
Yes.
So it was the first house. We moved out when I was 4 or 5.
Well, I was in 4th grade, so I was maybe 10. So you probably were, 6 or 7, something like that. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit older. It was a house where when we first moved in, it was very loud. lots of cupboards banging, hearing footsteps and all that kind of stuff. And from my recollection of that, at least through our parents, is the longer we were there, the quieter it got until we decided to move out again. Then it got really loud again.
I think it's just interesting, though, too, that it wasn't, it's not just us. Like, babysitters called the police. Mom would sit out on the front steps waiting for us to come home. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I know there was this thing, and, as I look back in my mind, I'm trying to remember if it actually happened or if I did it and that was what happened. But I felt like I remember setting my stuffed animals up every night as like a game, and they would be all different in the morning. Oh, and wow. I don't know. Part of me wonders if like maybe you did that one time with a friend, Teresa.
I have a confession, Erin. I have a confession. I think I did that to you.
All right. In a haunted house. That actually
you were very scared of the haunted house, and I kind of played
Great way for a child to navigate the world.
Well, so go back now then to your memory of Dad. What were you thinking specifically about that?
So that is the first time that I ever remember kind of he was always there in the background, I guess, in my mind. I didn't really think of it either way, but I just how serious he was, and looking at the profile of his face as he watched the hallway that was over the bed, the head of the bed that we were all on, as he would watch the footsteps as they went down the hall, above him, and just he was scared and intense about it.
That was a very loud, obnoxious house, and that I will go to my grave knowing that house was haunted.
Well, I do know that we did eventually put carpeting in that hallway, and the footsteps went away after the carpeting was there.
Yeah.
So if you had to describe Dad, how would you describe him?
He really cared about his family, and he never missed one of my track practices. He used to come and watch my track practices. He never missed a game I was in, a play I was in. That went all the way through my high school years. And then even after high school, when I had my own children, he would at least show face. And he did the best he could. He would beg, lie, and cheat and steal, whatever, to get to everything. He would try to, anyhow. And, he put in a lot of effort to show up on a regular basis. And that's something I strive to do. He always showed up, and he called once a week, always checking in. And he put a lot of effort into us kids, and I guess I didn't even realize that until he wasn't here, So go ahead, Erin.
Don't get me started, Missy. So I should have gone first. So I handed that to you. So I just, God, I remember, how would I describe him? I got to get back. Okay. I would describe him as just the funniest person I've ever met. And not good funny, not nice funny, but dark humor funny, which was even more hysterical. And just over anything else, I think that he'd love to play in it. Everything has to be a competition. Everything has to be a game. And, he would have change, and he would try to cheat, I think, almost to see if you'd catch him because he thought it was cute. And so I just my deep love for the darker side of human comes directly from him, and I can feel him laughing inside me half the time. It's and that's just that joy.
So give me an example of dark humor.
Oh gosh. Oh, well, you know what I'm going to say. It also ties into the favorite memory. So we can I could kill two birds with one stone right here. We would take family vacations, much like the Griswolds when we were younger. And we actually had a station wagon. In fact, during this, my favorite memory, we had a station wagon just like that with the wood paneling. But we get to the Black Mountains, and we're sitting in the back, and we see a black bear on the side of the road. And Dad pulls over, and we're looking at it, and Joe's getting nervous, and I felt something was coming. I was already kind of giggling before it even happened. I've been around enough. And he pulls out a chocolate bar from his pocket, and he reaches towards the back seat, and he says, Joe, why don't you come on and go feed this bear this candy bar, see if you can get him a little closer. I want to take a good picture. And Joe's like, Dad, stop it. No. And I was like, Joe, come on. And Dad's like, oh, come on, just real quick. We'll get you back in the car, and you're crying by this time. And I was laughing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. I thought it was going to back out. It was the best, because he took it past to like where you already were starting to cry to full-blown tears. Before he's like, oh, I'm just kidding. Like a little too far. So, yeah, I would say that's my favorite memory, and one of the, most, probably, it's a great acronym or kind of story of his life that kind of encapsulates that amazing sense of humor that I miss and love.
Teresa, do you have any funny story that you were thinking about?
I don't necessarily have I don't even know if this falls into the category of a funny story, but Dad could always make things work or do his best to try to make things work. You remember that old pontoon we had that was falling apart that had wood bottoms and fence things for the pit outside? It wasn't even a real pontoon, I don't think. Do you guys remember that? We were at the lake at this point. Mm-hmm. And the motor never worked. It wasn't the one he ended up with. It was the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even know what that thing was, but he called it the pontoon. And so he was having a party with Laney's and Dandelids, I believe. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. But a party of BA parents. And he couldn't get the boat to start at all. The motor would not work at all. And I lived on a French lake at that time. I was dating Al, and we had this tiny little fishing boat that had a tiny little motor on it. I don't think ever went more than a mile an hour or 2 miles an hour. And so he came over, and he got that little motor, and he loaded it on that piece of plywood that he had, and that's what he took everybody on the boat.
Oh, we're going on the pontoon ride.
Right.
I don't care if it's raining.
Well, he was having friends over for a pontoon ride. They were going to go whether they crawled or...
I was just thinking on a recent vacation when he insisted on renting a pontoon during a cold windstorm that was raining. Do you remember that?
That's right. We did have to go back
on the pontoon ride.
Yeah. We did, but we were still going out. We were going to try.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say the nicest thing was that he might have ever done for you individually?
It was Christmas 2013. My kids were 7 and 8, maybe. We lived in an apartment that was on the 3rd floor of a Victorian house here in Northfield. And the stairs to get up there were all outside, like in a fire escape sort of deal, going up the side to the very top 3rd floor, or like what would be maybe the attic in most places, I suppose, mm-hmm. to our apartment. And so it's Christmas morning, and our dad always had Christmas on the 23rd. So it's like the morning of the 25th. So we'd already had his Christmas, and I had just gotten up with the kids, and we were doing our little Christmas inside, and we heard like a loud thump outside on the stairs going down to the parking lot. And he must have moved very, very quickly because we didn't see him, didn't hear him, but we went out to the door to see what we had heard. And, of course, the kids and I had this, tiny TV that we would watch TV on. And we go open the door, and it was a beautiful, light snow. It was just like a magical movie scene. And here's this giant TV in a box that just said, "From Santa." And it was Christmas, when I was a little girl, because we were all surprised, and I wouldn't have thought he would do anything after we already, had our Burgess Christmas. And so, and he got away before we even saw him.
And that was after the 23rd? That was Christmas Day?
Yeah, it was Christmas morning. And I think he knew it was just me and the kids. So like that is their favorite Christmas too. It's like their favorite memory in Christmas. It was just so impactful. It was just very visceral for us. We all like bursted into tears and thought it was so like nice. I went first. There you go, Teresa.
How do I top that? I don't have one that good.
You don't have to top it. No, I just didn't want to. I knew it was going to be emotional to get through because that was just a hard living time for me and the kids. So yeah. I knew that was going to be tough.
All right, so what's the question? My favorite memory?
It was, well, what was the nicest thing that Dad ever did for you?
He did so many nice things. I mean, how do you pinpoint one thing, right?
Well, I know. It's like, when I tried to give his eulogy, the idea of how do you filter down a whole life into, a 10-minute conversation.
Or a story that is worthy of the whole part,
Right.
Of the whole story. He did so many, and just maybe to go along with your Christmas theme, I mean, Christmas was Dad's deal, right? I mean, that was the time of year, and that was his thing. And, this Christmas is going to be a little tough, my kids are already dreading it because for many years, Grandpa's Christmas was the only Christmas that mattered. It didn't matter what he was getting from any other grandparents. It didn't matter what they were getting from their parents. From us, it didn't matter because, I would say from 10 to 15, whatever they wanted, they asked Grandpa, and it was, they could hardly wait for Grandpa's Christmas because that was the only Christmas that mattered. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to make it a great Christmas come hell or high water this year for as many people as I can. In honor.
That's why I thought, how will we get through it if we don't celebrate it,
Right.
Out in the open, I think it would just be too crushing.
Right.
It would be really hard. Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking of was maybe not a grandiose thing, but maybe a little thing. A little thing, I guess, personality-wise, or a little thing interaction-wise. Something like that.
The thing that meant the most to me was after I was divorced, and I was, I was getting by. I could do everything, but it definitely was different for me. Being a single income, and I was going to school full time, and I was, and one day I was like, I have a little bit left of school I have to pay, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. And somehow that day he showed up with a check for my last semester at school, and I didn't. Like he had mental telepathy sometimes, It was really like the perfect time.
That is true.
Like, how did you know? How did you know that I was a little bit stressed out?
I assume you guys. Now I'm gonna say this out loud and totally regret it if I don't have a proper understanding of this. I assume we all got checks in the mail randomly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, I was like, should I tell the Christmas story because, I got an extra gift?
Because I feel like, and that was the only time I needed it. And I didn't even ask for it, but I needed it. And I think he must have somehow known in his weird way that I needed it. But he probably made it even to everybody, would be my guess. And then he'd have a little thing, don't tell anybody.
Right.
I'm going to guess that you guys got the same amount I got for my last semester of school. Then that one was on me.
He always, I think, I do remember him saying, because he was helping me out at one time when I was getting I love this white Volvo, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And he was, and I couldn't afford, and somebody was selling it just up the road from work, and for I don't know, how many, maybe $2,500 or something. And he goes, it's not that I'm just doing $2,500 $100 or whatever it was for the car for you. He's like, now I got to send that to Joe. Now I got to send it to Teresa. And it's like, I'm a good secret holder. You don't have to.
Thank you, Erin, for all the times you needed help, by the way.
You're welcome. So a lot of those checks are because he helped me, and now he had to do it for everybody else.
So, Erin, do you have, besides, obviously we've documented now that he's pretty generous with gifts and random checks in the mail and things like that. Any other just little things, little quirky things? Yeah.
So, I feel like I was very lucky in the fact that I was working with him for the last couple years.
At Our Home South. Yep, his business.
Yep. So I'm a care manager. Of course, he put me right back in an apartment little house that's attached to his office. So I was a care manager back there, and he, was in the office around the front. And every morning I would go in to get my mail, and I'd go in and hassle him a little bit. And I just always loved him looking up in his smiling eyes. And we'd chit-chat and tell a few jokes. We'd kind of recap anything that's going on. And then he would always stand up and he'd come around his desk and just give me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. And I would feel so lucky that I got to do that so often, so recently. And that I had that opportunity. And, and even he got so used to it where if I was busy and didn't go up for a day, he'd come back and see what I was doing, and we want to step out for a smoke. I'm like, absolutely. And just visit. And so just, he would always stand up, always hug me, and always give me a kiss on the cheek and say, I love you. And it was a nice way to start the day. I miss it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. I think that's great.
Very proper that way.
Yeah.
Very, he's an old school, farm boy, but manners count. How you present count. How you say goodbye count.
Hey, speaking of, do any of you ever have to make Dad's chili, beef stew, or caramel corn on a regular basis, or is it just myself?
I make the chili, and I don't know if I remember exactly how to make the caramel corn, which was so good. But Joe, don't you?
Yeah, I make the caramel corn all the time. Yeah, the homemade caramel corn.
Yeah.
So you pop the...
I have not perfected that, but I'm trying. It is not working out well. I need maybe your recipe, Joe. But I feel like those are the only three things that Dad made, and homemade pizza that was broke. I didn't like his homemade pizza.
Well, I think... I was going to say, I think the thing that he missed, I want to say it's vanilla.
Yeah.
Vanilla.
Yeah.
So
and the caramel corn
was missing.
we never had vanilla probably at home when we were growing up.
Probably not.
So caramel.
Make it work. We have to make it work.
Make it work. So caramel corn would be rock hard that you'd be digging off the bottom of the bowl.
Scraping off the bottom. And the next morning
with a knife.
Right. But if you had vanilla, it's actually soft caramel. It never hardens.
Oh, you're kidding. Yeah. Is that the ticket?
Picked it up though at the store. But Dad's cooking though is another big thing I don't think we touched on, and he had these dishes that were great, like potato salad he would make, and he did even for school events. And the chili actually just brought to mind when he would always come visit me no matter where I lived, and for a few years I lived in New York City, right down in Soho on Green Street. And he came to visit one time, and I was telling I had two roommates, and I was telling them about my dad and how he cooks chili, and they're like, no way. So he's like, yeah, let's go to a grocery store. And I'm like, well, there are no grocery stores really in Manhattan. You would have to go to Midtown, but there's, the convenience store, the deli, that's kind of where you get all your kind of groceries. Mm-hmm. That you have to carry 5 flights up to the loft where you live because they're all walk-ups.
Right.
So it's you don't want to buy more than you're going to walk about a mile home and walk up 5 stairs. So, delis work well, but they didn't have all the ingredients for the chili. But he figured something out with everything that he could find, and some meat that was I don't know what it was, but it was I like it because it's kind of like a posh deli, so it's he's kind of probably grabbing maybe vegan textured things or not even knowing. But anyway, he made it and it tasted amazing, and it was just cool that he made one of his dishes, in my apartment in New York when he visited.
Right.
That was cool.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, the potato salad that he made, which, I recall there's always like deviled eggs on the top, and he had to pour half of a jar of pickle juice into it, and all that kind of stuff. To me, I don't know if anybody else makes it that way, but it's the best tasting stuff. The best potato salad.
I make it that way. I make it that way. And where Dad got it is in, I think, because Grandma Roberta's tasted very similar, and she always had the pickles and the olives, or not the olives, the eggs
little
and stuff.
decoratively
Except for the only
out.
difference is that Grandma puts celery in it, and Dad put pickles in it. Pickles and onions for whatever reason, and I can't eat potato salad with celery to this day. I have to have it with pickles, and Dad always put pickles in it. And I could be wrong on Grandma's recipe, but I feel like hers had celery in it, but Dad's had pickles.
The other thing that I think about when I think about Dad is how creative and artistic he was.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, and I talked a little bit with Uncle Doug about this, that he could just come up with a poem.
Oh, God, yeah.
Moment's notice, right? He could script out.
Right.
He could rip out a 2-page poem if he wanted, And Doug was saying he always kind of hated because for a while there, they got each other gay gifts every Christmas, and that it accompanied with a poem. And Doug would always say, well, you realize how much shorter my poem was than your dad's, because he actually hated the poem part of it. But
he did.
Yeah. Anyway.
Dad liked the poem somehow.
Well, and do you remember, Joe, I feel like you and I laughed about this many times when he would draw little caricatures of like you or me with like warts and hair coming out, and they'd be like, this is your mother. And it'd be like this bald guy with 3 hairs and a big nose. And yeah,
very much like a free hand. He was a good artist. That's part of that Burgess side of the family, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I did not inherit that either.
What would you want people to know that we haven't talked about?
Well, have you talked to anybody about his business and his love for the special needs community? If anybody had a mental disability, all of a sudden Dad would wrap his arms around these folks. I remember when he was working at the state school, and there was a Down syndrome black boy, and I don't know his name. I was little. We lived at the Brown house, and Dad used to bring him home to our house quite often. I don't know the reason. All I knew was I was a little, and he always was bringing some of them home. And I believe that this young man lived in Casson, so he would maybe drive him back and forth. He had such a love for these humans that, it was even before it was the norm. Now they're more mainstream, right? But even before they were all mainstream, Dad was out with them all the time, and then he built his business around that to give them a place to live and to make sure that they're all taken care of. I feel like that should be remembered as well. He was really good to his family, but he was also good to the special needs community. That was a big deal to him,
Thanks for that. I was going to say, Erin, since you worked at the business he created, maybe you can enlighten us a little on what you saw while you were there.
Everyone knows at our home south what clean means: showroom ready. Showroom ready, like you're showing like a model home, clean. And but oh gosh, the best thing, he had a personal relationship with all of the people that he cared for, and they all knew him by name. They knew me as his daughter, and be like, Erin, how's Denny doing? Oh, I saw that Denny a couple weeks ago. He would go to their houses a lot of times for their birthdays and deliver cards. Or he'd get a pizza party for them, but he would give them a card. And so he built this personal relationship with every single individual. And even when he would have to be a little hard on them, because when they would screw up, everybody reported to one person, and that was Dad. And that includes every single employee, too. No managers, nothing. It's one boss. So he was like very much a grandfather over and father to like this whole community. So if he had to call and give him a hard time for something because they maybe weren't doing what they were supposed to be doing, he'd hang up the phone, and then he would, no matter what the tragic actually situation, he would find a way because they knew that he loved them and cared about them.
That's great. I mean, just how often do people get to feel like they have that kind of an influence when, like, interpersonal, not like a corporate influence, but a person-to-person influence with their work, right?
Right. And he was able to make a living at something that he loved, which caused him a lot of stress. I mean, we all saw that as well. But he was able to build a very successful business in something that he felt very passionate about, and not most people don't get to do that, right? A lot of people do, and I wish that everybody would be able to, but he got to. He was an entrepreneur. He did it, and he loved it.
And Teresa, to go off your point, that's all I knew, as probably you did, as I did. He opened the company when I just turned 18 and graduated from high school, and I was the worst employee he ever did hire, and I did get fired that first time around. I wasn't as committed as I needed to be, and I didn't even know when I started at the time. It wasn't great. But that's all I really knew. And then when I was older, I kind of went back and forth and worked for him, throughout the whole 25 years on and off. And then the last few years before he had died, I joined with him again. I lost my train of thought. What was it? Joe, what was I talking about?
You were...
Oh, it's the difference. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm back. Take two. So I start working at a day program, and that works with adults and, anyone over 18, essentially, with the same types of disabilities. And the person who was the president and kind of owner of that day program had her office in the back, and if there were ever any like behavior problems or that were threatening situations, which often happens all the time, whereas Dad would just like handle it, like shut it down immediately if he were there. At Sis, she always kind of just stayed in her room, and like no matter how it escalated, she never came out or got involved. And I would often notice her walking down the hallways past all of the people that she, is providing service to, and not one of them even said hello. I don't even know if they knew who she was. And when I went back to work with Dad, I often spoke of that, of what a contrast of what he was giving and what he was doing compared to probably a standard protocol, and very much so in other places. And that it was like a deep sense of committed family and love and protection and accountability.
Great. Well, you guys, thanks for taking the time. I know with everything that's gone on since he's died, which has been a pandemic and Black Lives Matter and riots and everything else, so we really just haven't had an opportunity, at least I don't feel, the part of this process right now feels like it's just the first start of, in a sense, mourning his loss, besides the initial shock.
Right.
It doesn't seem like there's, with so much going on, that you just haven't had any time to process.
Been frozen in time since like a week after he died.
Yeah, because he died right before the pandemic,
Right. And thank God, by the way, I mean, you hate to lose someone, but what a gift that we were able to have a funeral and not even have to navigate like if he would have died a weekend.
Right. Nobody would have been able to, because one of the things that I appreciate the most when I went to his wake was, all the people that came up and talked about how he had changed their lives or something, his personality or how he was always funny and gregarious and, whatever it was, or, how he had affected their lives. I feel like 75% of the people that were at that wake, which by the way was around the funeral home and out the door, right, of people that wanted to pay their respects.
Yes. Waiting
there
in
were several hundred people there.
Right.
That was crazy.
Oh,
yeah.
And I didn't know 75% of them. Right? So over and over again, it was, hey, I knew your dad from here. This is what he did, and this is why I'll miss him and all that kind of stuff. And so, had he died a month later, we wouldn't have known that. Yeah, we wouldn't have received the benefit of knowing, all of
any of that.
You never really think of, because I think of my relationship with him, and I don't think of all the dozens or hundreds of relationships he has without us. Where we're never around and they get to see the same guy, and it sounded like he was the same guy to all of those people.
Yeah. It did. I shouldn't say I was surprised at the amount of people that came to the funeral, but I was a little bit surprised at the amount of people that came to the wake and the funeral. Even the overflow rooms were packed and people were standing. I didn't appreciate, I don't think, when he was alive, that he was pretty special to a lot of people,
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we could keep going, but we'll probably just keep crying more, right?
We're going to go. Yeah, we're good.
So
we're all good.
I wanted to thank Teresa and Erin, my sisters. Yeah. Thank you guys for reminiscing and I guess helping me and any others who will listen to this podcast eventually start to process the loss and
right.
Thank you for doing this, Joe. I think it's as you said, we've been kind of trapped in this whole thing, and it's like we're all like kind of frozen in ice, and it's a good way to like come back together and remember that and be together, like that we're sad but with that great loss in common. And being so separated is almost just like puts the grieving on hold. So thank you for that. And I think, it's going to be a process, but it started, which is better than not started, I suppose.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Joe.
One of the things that my sisters didn't bring up in our interview, but I wanted to make note of was the Marty Robbins tunes that my Uncle Doug talked about in part 1. Marty Robbins was this singer from the 50s, and he had a number of songs that my grandma and grandpa were big fans of, and they used to sing in the car with my uncle and my dad and my aunts. I never knew that this was anything more than a family song, but when my sisters and I were young, my dad, upon request, would sing this song, and it was probably 5 verses long. It's just one of those things that it's an important memory and something that both my sisters and I always think about when we think about my dad, particularly when we were younger. So here's a little excerpt of When the Work's All Done This Fall.
Charlie died at daybreak, he died from a fall. Poor boy won't see his mother when the work's all done this fall.
Well, clearly the words of that song hit home a little bit more given the situation. And speaking of my dad's passing, I thought it would be important. We had a packed house at his funeral, and not everybody could really get in the doors. But I was the one who gave his eulogy, and so I thought maybe giving the final part of his eulogy and what I'd said about him might be pertinent. I saw my dad 3 weeks before he died. He came to watch my son Griffin play basketball, and we went out to lunch. When we left each other, he said, "I love you and I'm proud of you." In the last number of years, every time we talked, he'd finish the conversation with, "I love you and I'm proud of you." Thankfully, I started picking up on it too. And I began telling him I love him too. We didn't always do that. But today, I'm grateful that it became our tradition whenever we saw each other. He died suddenly, but I didn't have any regrets. I didn't not get a chance to tell him I love him. I did get that chance. We ended our conversation the last time I saw him the same way we always do. He'd say, I love you and I'm proud of you. And I'd say, I love you too, Dad. When I think of my dad, I think his life had the full range of emotions. He had the highest highs and the lowest lows. But at his core, he was good. He was thoughtful and he was kind. And I think that's a life well lived. I love you, Dad, and I'll miss you.